my friends, hello again. Today we are going to continue with Les leo un libro en inglés. This video will be part 8 in this series, and if you have not already watched the first 7 parts of this series, I will link down below to the playlist so you can watch the first 7, okay? There is a ton of great vocabulary in these videos. Here we go. Mr. Jeevens said that I liked maths because it was safe. He said I liked maths because it meant solving problems, and these problems were difficult and interesting, but there was always a straightforward answer at the end. And what he meant was that maths wasn't like life, because in life there are no straightforward answers at the end. I know he meant this because this is what he said. This is because Mr. Jeevens doesn't understand numbers. Here is a famous story called The Monty Hall Problem, which I have included in this book because it illustrates what I mean. There used to be a column called Ask Marilyn in a magazine called Parade in America. And this column was written by Marilyn Vos Savant, and in the magazine it said that she had the highest IQ in the world in the Guinness World Book of Records Hall of Fame. And in this column she answered maths questions sent in by readers, and in September 1990 this question was sent in by Craig F. Whitaker of Columbia, Maryland, but it is not what is called a direct quote because I have made it simpler and easier to understand. You are on a game show on television. On this game show the idea is to win a car as a prize. The game show host shows you 3 doors. He says that there is a car behind one of the doors, and there are goats behind the other 2. He asks you to pick a door. You pick a door, but the door is not opened. Then the game show host opens one of the doors you didn't pick to show a goat, because he knows what is behind the doors. Then he says that you have one final chance to change your mind before the doors are opened, and you get a car or a goat. So he asks if you want to change your mind and pick the other unopened door instead. What should you do? Marilyn Vos Savant said that you should always change and pick the final door because the chances are 2 in 3 that there will be a car behind that door. But if you use your intuition, you think the chance is 50-50 because you think there's an equal chance that the car is behind any door. Lots of people wrote to the magazine to say that Marilyn Vos Savant was wrong, even when she explained very carefully why she was right. Of the letters she got about the problem, 92% said that she was wrong, and lots of these were from mathematicians and scientists. Here are some of the things that they said. I'm very concerned with the general public's lack of mathematical skills. Please help by confessing your error. There is enough mathematical illiteracy in this country, and we don't need the world's highest IQ propagating more. Shame. I am in shock that after being corrected by at least 3 mathematicians, you still do not see your mistake. I am sure you will receive many letters from high school and college students. Perhaps you should keep a few addresses for help with your future column. You are utterly incorrect. How many irate mathematicians are needed to get you to change your mind? If all of those PhDs were wrong, the country would be in very serious trouble. But Marilyn Vos Savant was right, and here are 2 ways you could show this. Firstly, you can do it by maths, like this, and Christopher writes out the problem to explain it. Okay guys, so he writes out this complicated math equation, okay? It's going to be very hard to read it to you guys. But Christopher is explaining why the mathematician lady with the high IQ was actually correct, and it's beneficial to change your choice of doors. This is what it looks like. He has equations because Christopher is very smart, and he knows a lot more about math than I do. The second way you could work it out is by making a picture of all the possible outcomes like this. And then he shows it like this. And these say, you are asked to choose the door, you choose the door with the goat behind it, etc., etc. Christopher is just explaining the problem once again, but he is explaining it in a way that is too complicated for me because I am not a mathematician. So, if you change 2 times out of 3, you get a car. And if you stick or stay with your previous choice, you only get a car 1 time out of 3. And this shows that intuition can sometimes get things wrong. And intuition is what people use in life to make decisions, but logic can help you work out the right answers. It also shows that Mr. Jeevons was wrong, and numbers are sometimes very complicated and not very straightforward at all. And that is why I like the Monty Hall problem. When I got home, Rodri was there. Rodri is the man who works for Father, helping him to do heating maintenance and boiler repair. And he sometimes comes around to the house in the evening to drink beer with Father and watch television and have a conversation. Rodri was wearing a pair of white dungarees, and guys, we would say jeans, okay? Es un tipo de pantalón. We would say jeans, but here he's using the word dungarees. Rodri was wearing a pair of white dungarees, which had dirty marks all over them, and he had a gold ring on the middle finger of his left hand, and he smelled of something I do not know the name of, which Father often smells of when he comes home from work. I put my licorice laces and my Milky Bar in my special food box on the shelf, which Father is not allowed to touch because it is mine. Then Father said, "And what have you been up to, young man?" And I said, "I went to the shop to get some licorice laces and a Milky Bar." And he said, "You were a long time." And I said, "I talked to Mrs. Alexander's dog outside the shop, and I stroked him and he sniffed my trousers," which was another white lie. Then Rodri said to me, "God, you do get the 3rd degree, don't you?" But I didn't know what the 3rd degree was. Okay guys, so to get the 3rd degree means that somebody is really questioning you. They keep asking you, "Where have you been? Oh, what were you doing there? Who was there?" Okay? And he said, "So how are you doing, Captain?" And I said, "I'm doing very well, thank you," which is what you're meant to say. And he said, "What's 251 times 864? And I thought about this, and I said, 216,864. Because it was a really easy sum, because you just multiply 864 times 1,000, which is 864,000. Then you divide it by 4, which is 216,000, and that's 250 times 864. Then you just add another 864 onto it to get 251 times 864, and that's 216,864. Okay guys, you see that Christopher is very good with math. Much better than I am. And I said, "Is that right?" And Rodri said, "I haven't got a bloody clue," and he laughed. I didn't like it when Rodri laughs at me. Rodri laughs at me a lot. Father says it is being friendly. Then Father said, "I'll stick to one of those gobi aloo sag things that's in the oven for you, okay? That's some Indian food." This is because I like Indian food, because it has a strong taste. But gobi aloo sag is yellow, so I put red food coloring into it before I eat it, and I keep a little plastic bottle of this in my special food box. Okay guys, that shows a little bit more about Christopher's autistic mind. His favorite food is an Indian food, but it's yellow, so he can't eat it because he does not like the color yellow. So he puts red coloring into it to change the color before he eats it. That just shows you how different this boy thinks. And I said, "Okay." And Rodri said, "So, it looks like Parky stitched them up then." But this was to Father, not to me. And Father said, "Well, those circus boards looked like they'd come out of the bloody ark." And Rodri said, "You going to tell them?" And Father said, "What's the point? They're hardly going to take him to court, are they?" And Rodri said, "That'll be the day." And Father said, "Best to let sleeping dogs lie, I reckon." Then I went to the garden. So, best to let sleeping dogs lie is an expression that means just leave something alone, okay? Don't mess with it. Don't make a problem when you don't have to. Just leave it alone. Let the sleeping dog lie. Shaban said that when you are writing a book, you have to include some descriptions of things. I said that I could take photographs and put them in the book. But she said the idea of a book was to describe things using words so that people could read them and make a picture in their own head. And she said it was best to describe things that were interesting or different. She also said that I should describe people in the story by mentioning 1 or 2 details about them so that people could make a picture of them in their head, which is why I wrote about Mr. Jeevan's shoes with all the holes in them, and the policeman who looked as if he had 2 mice in his nose, and the thing Rodri smelled of, but I didn't know the name for. So, I decided to do a description of the garden, but the garden wasn't very interesting or different. It was just a garden, with grass, and a shed, and a clothesline. But the sky was interesting and different, because usually skies look boring, because they are all blue, or all gray, or all covered in one pattern of clouds, and they don't look like they are hundreds of miles above your head. They look like someone might have painted them on a big roof. But this sky had a lot of different types of clouds in it, at different heights, so you could see how big it was, and this made it look enormous. Furthest away in the sky were lots of little white clouds, which looked like fish scales, or sand dunes, which had a very regular pattern. Then, next furthest away, and to the west, were some big clouds, which were colored slightly orange because it was nearly evening and the sun was going down. Then, closest to the ground was a huge cloud, which was colored gray because it was a rain cloud. And it was a big pointy shape, and it looked like this. And when I looked at it for a long time, I could see it moving very slowly, and it was like an alien spaceship hundreds of kilometers long, like in Dune, or Blake 7, or Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Except that it wasn't made of solid material. It was made of droplets of condensed water vapor, which is what clouds are made of. And it could have been an alien spaceship. People think that alien spaceships would be solid and made of metal and have lights all over them and move slowly through the sky because that is how we would build a spaceship if we were able to build one that big. But aliens, if they exist, would probably be very different from us. They might look like big slugs, or be flat like reflections, or they might be bigger than planets, or they might not have bodies at all. They might just be information, like a computer. And their spaceships might look like clouds, or be made up of unconnected objects like dust or leaves. Then I listened to the sounds in the garden, and I could hear a bird singing, and I could hear traffic noise, which was like the surf on a beach, and I could hear someone playing music somewhere and children shouting. And in between these noises, if I listened very carefully and stood completely still, I could hear a tiny whining noise inside my ears and the air going in and out of my nose. Then I sniffed the air to see if I could see what the air in the garden smelled like, but I could not smell anything. It smelled of nothing. And this was interesting too. Then I went inside and fed Toby. The Hound of the Baskervilles is my favorite book. In The Hound of the Baskervilles, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson get a visit from James Mortimer, who is a doctor from the moors in Devon. James Mortimer's friend, Sir Charles Baskerville, has died of a heart attack, and James Mortimer thinks that he might have been scared to death. James Mortimer also has an ancient scroll which describes the curse of the Baskervilles. On this scroll, it says that Sir Charles Baskerville had an ancestor called Sir Hugo Baskerville, who was a wild, profane, and godless man, and he tried to do sex with a daughter of a yeoman, but she escaped and he chased her across the moor, and his friends who were daredevil roisterers chased after him. Okay guys, I honestly don't know what a yeoman is. probably something very British. But that just goes to show that even if you are reading a book in your native language, there are going to be things you don't understand. So never feel bad if you are reading a book in English and you don't understand a word, because I find words that I cannot understand when I read in English too. Okay, guys? And when they found him, the daughter of the yeoman had died of exhaustion and fatigue. And they saw a great black beast, shaped like a hound, yet larger than any hound that ever mortal eye has rested on. This hound was tearing the throat out of Sir Hugo Baskerville. And one of the friends died of fear that very night, and the other two were broken men for the rest of their days. James Mortimer thinks that the Hound of Baskervilles might have scared Sir Charles to death, and he is worried that his son and heir, Sir Henry Baskerville, will be in danger when he goes to the hall in Devon. So, Sherlock Holmes sends Dr. Watson to Devon with Sir Henry Baskerville and James Mortimer, and Dr. Watson tries to work out who might have killed Sir Charles Baskerville. And Sherlock Holmes says he will stay in London, but he travels to Devon secretly and does investigations of his own. And Sherlock Holmes finds out that Sir Charles was killed by a neighbor called Stapleton, who is a butterfly collector and a distant relation of the Baskervilles. And Stapleton is poor, so he tries to kill Sir Henry Baskerville so that he will inherit the hall. In order to do this, he has brought a huge dog from London and covered it in phosphorus to make it glow in the dark. And it was this dog which scared Sir Charles Baskerville to death. And Sherlock Holmes and Watson and Lestrade from Scotland Yard catch him. And Sherlock Holmes and Watson shoot the dog, which is one of the dogs which gets killed in the story, which is not nice because it is not the dog's fault. And Stapleton escapes into Grimpen Mire, which is part of the moor, and he dies because he is sucked into a bog. There are some bits of the story I don't like. One bit is the ancient scroll because it is written in old language, which is difficult to understand, like this. Learn then from this story not to fear the fruits of the past, but rather to be circumspect in the future, that those foul passions whereby our family has suffered so grievously may not again be loosed to our undoing. And sometimes Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who was the author of Sherlock Holmes, describes people like this. There was something subtly wrong with the face, some coarseness of expression, some hardness, perhaps of eye, some looseness of lip which marred its perfect beauty. I don't know what some hardness, perhaps of eye means. I'm not interested in faces. But sometimes it is fun not knowing what the words mean because you can look them up in a dictionary, like goyle, which is a deep dip, or tors, which are hills or rocky heights. I like The Hounds of Baskervilles because it is a detective story, which means that there are clues and red herrings. These are some of the clues. 1. 2 of Sir Henry Baskerville's boots go missing when he is staying at a hotel in London. This means that someone wants to give them to the Hound of Baskervilles to smell, like a bloodhound, so that it can chase him. This means that the Hound of the Baskervilles is not a supernatural being, but a real dog. 2. Stapleton is the only person who knows how to get through the Grimpen Mire, and he tells Watson to stay out of it for his own safety. This means that he is hiding something in the middle of Grimpen Mire and doesn't want anyone else to find it. 3. Mrs. Stapleton tells Dr. Watson to go straight back to London instantly. This is because she thinks Dr. Watson is Sir Henry Baskerville, and she knows that her husband wants to kill him. And these are some of the red herrings. 1. Sherlock Holmes and Watson are followed when they are in London by a man in a coach with a black beard. This makes you think that the man is Barrymore, who is the caretaker at Baskerville Hall, because he is the only other person who has a black beard. But the man is really Stapleton, who is wearing a fake beard. 2. Selden, the Notting Hill murderer. This is a man who has escaped from a prison nearby and is being hunted down on the moors, which makes you think that he has something to do with the story. And because he is a criminal, but he hasn't anything to do with the story at all. 3. The man on the tour. This is a silhouette of a man that Dr. Watson sees on the moor at night and doesn't recognize, which makes you think it is the murderer. But it is Sherlock Holmes who has come to Devon secretly. I also like The Hound of Baskervilles because I like Sherlock Holmes, and I think if I were a proper detective, he is the kind of detective I would be. He is very intelligent, and he solves the mystery, and he says, "The world is full of obvious things which nobody by any chance ever observes, but he notices them like I do." Also, it says in the book, Sherlock Holmes had, in a very remarkable degree, the power of detaching his mind at will. This is like me too, because if I get really interested in something, like practicing maths, or reading a book about the Apollo missions or great white sharks, I don't notice anything else, and Father can be calling me to come and eat my supper, and I will not hear him. This is why I'm very good at playing chess, because I detach my mind at will and concentrate on the board. And after a while, the person I'm playing with will stop concentrating and start scratching their nose or staring out of the window, and then they will make a mistake and I will win. Also, Dr. Watson says about Sherlock Holmes, his mind was busy in endeavoring to frame some scheme into which all these strange and apparently disconnected episodes could be fitted. That is what I'm trying to do by writing this book. Also, Sherlock Holmes doesn't believe in the supernatural, which is God and fairy tales and hounds of hell and curses, which are stupid things. And I'm going to finish this chapter with 2 interesting facts about Sherlock Holmes. 1. In the original Sherlock Holmes stories, Sherlock Holmes is never described as wearing a deerstalker hat. That is the hat that Sherlock Holmes famously wears, which is what he is always wearing in pictures and cartoons. The deerstalker hat was invented by a man called Sidney Paget, who did the illustrations for the original books. 2. In the original Sherlock Holmes stories, Sherlock Holmes never says, "Elementary, my dear Watson." He only ever says this in films and on the television. Okay guys, that is it for this week's installation of Les leo un libro en inglés. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. This video seemed a little more difficult for me, some difficult vocabulary and trying to explain the math. So I think it's going to be a big challenge for you guys, but ánimo amigos, okay? We're all learning a little bit each day, and soon enough you will be able to understand things like this easily. Alright my friends, I'll see you in the next episode, y como siempre, muchísimas gracias por ver. Nos vemos pronto.